good to go.
Good morning, everyone. I'd like to call to order the open meeting for Thursday, June 29th, 2023, and ask the Commission Secretary for information on today's agenda.
Each commissioner has independently reviewed the minutes of the open meeting of Thursday, June 22nd, 2023, and each has informed me there is no need to discuss the minutes.
I move we approve the minutes of June 22nd, 2023.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Each commissioner has independently reviewed the agenda, and each has informed me there is no need to discuss the notices associated with agenda items 2 through 8, the suggested minute associated with agenda item 9, granting Clean Wisconsin's request for intervenor compensation for its participation in docket 9813 CE 100 in the amount of $35,555 contingent upon availability of intervenor compensation funds for state fiscal year 2024. The suggested minute associated with agenda item 10, approving WEPCO gas operations and WEPCO's request for a natural gas pipeline capacity release transaction subject to all of the conditions outlined in Commission staff's memorandum of June 16th, 2023, or the suggested minute associated with agenda item 11, approving the proposed appointments for the Wind Siting Council.
I move we approve the notices of investigation associated with agenda items 2 through 4.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Move we approve the notice of proceedings associated with agenda items 5 through 8.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
In docket,
Aye.
in docket 1 IC 545, I move we approve the applicant's intervenor compensation request in the amount of $35,555 contingent upon availability of IC funds for state fiscal year 2024.
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
In docket 5 AG 119, I move we approve the applicant's request as filed, subject to all of the conditions identified in the memorandum.
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
And in docket 5 WF 2023, I move we approve the proposed appointments to the Wind Siting Council.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That brings us to agenda item 12, and Commissioner Strand is going to lead the discussion for this item.
Thank you, Chair Vaughn. Before us is an application for Northern States Power Company, Wisconsin, for a waiver of its tariff schedule EX 18, section 4.3, regarding repairs to customer-owned equipment. The applicant has requested a project-specific waiver limited to work associated with its installation of advanced metering infrastructure, or AMI. In its current state, Schedule EX 18, section 4.3, requires all wiring and equipment on the customer's side of the point of connection, except for metering equipment, to be furnished and installed at the customer's expense. As part of the applicant's Advanced Grid Intelligence and Security Initiative, it intends to install AMI meters for all Wisconsin Electric customers. The utility proposes to facilitate minor repairs of meter sockets and meter housing located before the customer-owned conductor if it is found to be in violation of good electrical practice, the National Electric Code, National Electrical Safety Code, wiring regulations of any governing body with jurisdiction, or the applicant's tariff. The applicant's requested waiver would primarily impact residential customers as well as some smaller non-residential customers. The applicant proposes to assess larger non-commercial customers with self-contained facilities on a case-by-case basis. As was outlined in the Commission staff memo, what is presently before the Commission right now is whether the proposed project-specific change to the tariff is appropriate. The memo does identify two potential issues. First is whether it is appropriate for the utility to undertake the work on the equipment that would otherwise be the customer's responsibility, and ultimately who will pay for that work. The second issue is whether the proposed changes are unduly discriminatory in that the utility will do the work on behalf of some customers but not all. In this specific circumstance, the record demonstrates that this waiver would apply to a small number of customers, approximately 500, mostly residential customers. And to the degree these customers will require equipment corrections to support the AMI installation, the costs associated with the equipment corrections would be in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. So there are questions of who pays and whether it is discriminatory to allow the applicant to perform repairs for some customers and not for others. On the topic of cost, the memo identified that the applicant had included a share of the AMI costs in its rate case settlement agreement in docket 4220 UR 125, and that costs specific to this request were included as part of the 2023 AMI deployment costs. So the applicant already has the funding to complete these repairs and is not requesting a deferral for 2023 expenses. However, those costs were included before the commission weighed in on the tariff changes requested in this docket. So the timing is a little funky on this one. I think dingy was the word used in our briefing. Additionally, the 2024 AMI deployment costs, which are included in the applicant's ongoing rate case proceeding in docket 4220 UR 126, are inclusive of the costs associated with this request. So if we approve the request here today, the associated cost of repair work to be completed will be reviewed in the applicant's pending rate case proceeding. Ultimately, I am supportive of granting the applicant's request for a project-specific modification to Schedule EX 18, Section 4.3 of its tariff regarding repairs to customer-owned equipment limited to the utilities installation of AMI. The AMI metering rollout is a Wisconsin-wide project for NSPW, and I am generally supportive of the continued implementation of AMI metering across the state. The applicant has brought to light a complicated issue with this filing in that it has identified approximately 500 customers that will require some form of customer-side repair work. And in its present form, the applicant's tariffs indicate that the cost of this repair work is the customer's responsibility. I think it's fair to assume that it would be quite a shock for customers who could receive a bill in the thousands of dollars for repair work. And I think it is also reasonable to assume that the bill may be an amount that many customers could find difficult to pay, as the figures referenced in the memo are not cheap. So I do think it's reasonable to support the applicant's request. But with that being said, I do want to make clear that with the qualifier that my support of the tariff change is not a determination of the recoverability of these costs associated with the modification. In the pending rate case, the applicant will need to demonstrate why it's reasonable for all customers to pay the cost of the portion of the project costs associated with repairs to customer-owned equipment. And I do anticipate reviewing those as part of the 4220 UR 126 rate case proceeding, and depending on what we decide as to recoverability of those costs, adjusting the 2024 budget accordingly. The commission staff memo also included some potential conditions that we can include as part of an approval, but before I share my thoughts on those, I would like to give Chair Bach and Commissioner Huebner a chance to weigh in on the applicant's request before we get to the conditions. So Chair Bach, would you like to discuss that at all right now?
Yes, thank you, Commissioner Strand. So in this particular case, I'm actually at alternative 3. I do not think that the applicant has made a case based on the filings in this docket that other ratepayers should be on the hook to pay for customer-owned repair work as described in the filings. I could potentially be persuaded to authorize the modification, but I'm not prepared to do so based on the record in this case because my biggest concern is the use of ratepayer dollars to pay for the customer-owned repair work. Now, if the applicant wants to use shareholder dollars or they want to go out and get some type of grant funding to pay for that work, I would be okay with that. But using ratepayer dollars to pay for the customer side, I can't get over the concerns and the cross-subsidization that occurs, even if it's a small group of customers. And as it relates to the pending case, I would actually like to have the 2024 test year budget for this project be adjusted to reflect what's actually spent in 2023 for the meters and associated other expenses, but to specifically exclude any customer-owned repair costs. So I'm at alternative 3.
Thank you, Chair Bach. Commissioner Huebner?
Well, this is an interesting one now. So I am kind of in the middle where I do think they need to provide more information to us in order to have these costs recovered. But I do think, as Commissioner Strand said, when a utility comes to replace your meter and then they say, oh, by the way, your meter housing is wrong, or we need to upgrade something else on the outside of your house and the bill's $2,000, $1,500. Some people may say, okay, then don't switch my meter. And so we talked about that a little in our briefing is, okay, well, you could disconnect them during the summer, but during the winter, you're required to serve them when the moratorium's on. So you can't just say, we're not going to serve you if you don't switch to your AMI meter. So to me, there's going to be some kind of ongoing cost. I think what I would like to see is them talk about those overall system benefits of really getting all customers onto the AMI meters, having just one meter platform, and contrary what those costs would be if some of these customers refuse. What's the cost to kind of keep this legacy system in place? I think that would have been more helpful if we had it now in this proceeding, and that's why I said I was kind of in the middle. I wish that explanation would have been given to us now, but with that said, I can see the situation and just thinking about my own house, right? I mean, if that were to happen to me, I just think that you would just expect that anything on the outside of your house belongs to the utility. I think the average customer expects that that's true, and then you find out, well, that's not actually true. I think the other thing, and this is in our sub-alternative B, is making sure that when we get the reporting, descriptive information on the nature and the cost of the repairs. I mean, it would have been more helpful. It was just a little vague how they described minor repairs. They did mention a couple examples, but didn't really box themselves into what they expect to find. I think it would have been more helpful to limit that. So I guess where I could be at approving it, or I could be at sending it back for getting more information, but where I really landed, I guess, unless either of you two want to entertain sending it back for more information, was to grant the project-specific modification, but then get this extra information in the rate case that would help us determine whether that should be recovered or not.
So, yes, that's where I was as well. I agree with you. I think the record is lacking in terms of justification, impacts. I feel like they kind of glossed over that part of it and didn't really give us that information to help us make that decision. Yeah. But I also think that Chair Vach raised some good points. But at the same time, I feel like punishing these 500 customers in the thousands of dollars because of NSPW's lack of information provided, and the weird timing of this isn't necessarily fair to them either. So I could join you in asking for more information on that front, rather than just denying it altogether. If we think that the information gathered from that could help us get to a clearer consensus, because I'm like you, I was just kind of could go either way on some of this stuff, just given the vagueness of the record, like you said.
I'm firmly at alt 3. I feel really strongly about this, and while I can empathize with the customer, and I completely agree with both of your comments about, it's a small group of customers, and ultimately they'd be penalized. Unfortunately, that's the way the law is written, in terms of who is responsible for costs as the service comes into a customer's house. And rather than penalize the customers, I guess my suggestion is that the management of the utility take a hard look at how to otherwise absorb. It's only hundreds of thousands of dollars. We're not talking about millions. I'm sure that there would be an opportunity for management to find a way to cover those costs by not utilizing ratepayer dollars. So I thought the application itself was short on really relevant details, but I feel pretty strongly about this, so I'm going to stay at alt 3.
Well, maybe that leaves us at get more information. Is that an option for us?
It certainly is. I think timing becomes a question, as I know that I think the applicants said in data requests or something that they hope to start in the third quarter. And as we get more information and push this down, then we kind of end up at the same time we are processing the rate case. So we can certainly do that, but I think the company would need to kind of timely get some additional information in here. Otherwise, it's a horse apiece if there's much delay.
Could we give them a 30-day deadline on filing new information?
You can give them a shorter deadline, which I think I would
Okay,
suggest
15.
to file. And again, I think we can do this instead of a commission order. I think we can do a short data request. I think we understand what it is and provide that that information and that timing. So this would be then just laid over
Yep.
until receipt of that information.
Okay. So I'll make a motion consistent with that part of the discussion to hold it over and give them a 15-day deadline to submit more information through a data request.
We typically wouldn't on a
Not-
layover.
okay,
We're
just-
fine.
okay.
Laying.
Just laying- okay,
Laying it
perfect.
over.
So no further
Just
discussion.
take no action.
No action. Yep. Okay, great.
Okay.
Thank you guys very much for your discussion on
Yeah,
that.
thank you for leading that.
Yeah.
It's a complicated one.
Thank you.
Thanks, Commissioner Strand. We're going to move to agenda item 13, and Commissioner Hebner is going to lead the discussion on this one.
Thank you, Chair Bach. So this is docket 6630 EI 117. It's a request of Dominion Properties in Milwaukee for a waiver of Wisconsin Administrative Code PSC 113.0803 sub 1. That administrative code generally requires individual electric meters for each dwelling in a multi-dwelling residential building. Dominion would like a waiver from that for their building, which is called Sage on Jackson. Currently, each of the residential dwelling units are separately metered with a total of 21 separate meters in the building, and Dominion is proposing to reduce that down to one building meter. The description provided by by Dominion Properties describes the property as having 22 ground source heat pumps, one in each residential unit, that interface with 18 geothermal wells for their heating, ventilation, and air conditioning supply. It has a 20 kilowatt solar photovoltaic array, 8-inch thick walls with mineral wool insulation, a 95% efficient gas boiler to serve as emergency heat backup, U-glazing for windows, centralized domestic water heating, a green roof, Energy Star appliances, and extensive use of LED lighting, and overall it is a LEED Platinum certified building. Dominion is seeking this waiver. A chunk of their justification internally appears to be the administrative complexity of managing these 22 different meters, or 21 different meters. The bills are so low for those customers that they have decided to just take on the bills for themselves. So there's a connection fee and then the energy use. The memo describes the situation that the electric usage is typically about the same as what the connection fee is. So we have three options before us. One is to deny the waiver. The other two are related to the way our administrative code is written. There are opportunities for waivers. One is under 08.03 sub 5, and that is that if we determine the electric equipment under tenant control is substantially more efficient than required by applicable codes, and that the overall electric usage under tenant control is minimal, then we could grant a waiver there. The other option that we have is alternative 2 in our memo, and that's related to PSC 113.01 sub 2, and that is related to exceptional or unusual circumstances presented by a request. And with that situation, we can exercise the commission's authority to adopt requirements different than those provided in the code. This was another very difficult one for me, and I'm very curious to hear what my colleagues have to say on this. Ultimately, I think at the end of the day, my read is that the electric equipment is quite efficient. However, there's, numerous appliances within. When the commission granted a waiver for a building, I think it was in Oshkosh, there's really just lighting and maybe kitchen appliances. In that particular case, this one has, it does have the heating and cooling, it does have washer and dryer. So whether that still fits from your perspectives, I think is a question, and then whether the overall electric usage is minimal. They describe how, again, like I said, the electric usage payment is almost the same as the connection fee. So it's up to our discretion whether that is minimal or not. So with that tee up, I'm going to reserve my thoughts and see if Chair Vach has thoughts first, and then respond to that. Chair?
Thanks, Commissioner Huebner. I am solidly at all three. Once again, I would deny this request for a couple of reasons. The first is exactly what you mentioned, and that is in prior cases that we have agreed to grant a waiver, the usage pattern was different. And so for me, in this case, the usage that is under tenant control is actually more than what we've seen in other cases. And while I appreciate the efforts and I applaud the applicant for the efficiency of their building, I think it's exceptional. And it didn't go unnoticed. A couple of things. The first thing is that all of the units in this building are currently wired for individual tenant metering. That's the way the law is written. And unfortunately for me, administrative complexity does not meet the standard of unique, exceptional, or unusual under the code in order to be able to grant a waiver. So while I have been inclined to grant waivers in the past, these situations are very case specific. And in this particular case, I don't believe that the applicant has met the requirements under the law. And I would suggest to this applicant that they reach out to the company and talk about things like group bill or auto pay. I know there were comments submitted about the accuracy of some of the group billing. And I would just encourage this applicant to reach out to the utility and try to come up with a solution that doesn't entail writing 20 checks and putting them in 20 different envelopes every month. But unfortunately, I don't believe that there's anything that was provided that, in my mind, satisfies the criteria under the code. So I'm at all three.
Yeah, no, thank you for that, Chair. And I completely see your point. I think the tough thing that I wrestled with is if this building had instead been built with one centralized geothermal unit to heat and cool everybody, then we have these code provisions that talk about when alternative renewable energy resources are utilized in connection with central heating, ventilation, and air conditioning, then individual unit metering is not required. So almost if they had built the building differently, then maybe it would have qualified for a waiver. But the fact that they have it set up with these individual 20 tenant meters, it makes it very difficult now with no changes being requested. The other thing that we've seen when we've granted these waivers is that there's a renovation happening, or in the case of Mr. Balaz, there was a consideration of adding solar PV, but it hadn't been done yet, and so this is a case.
Any comment on that?
No, sorry. Yeah. So I'll kick it to you, Commissioner Strand, yeah.
I'm actually solidly at alternative 3 as well, for all the reasons that Chair Vach stated. If I would restate them, it would be unnecessarily redundant. I just don't think it meets any of the criteria that are available to us. Thank you.
Okay. I can join you there, but it's, to me, a very close call, and again, certainly a very impressive building from a sustainability and energy efficiency performance perspective. So, all right, with that, I will move then in docket 6630 EI 117 that we, at this time, deny the request of Dominion for the waiver.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, that concludes our official business for today. Our next open meeting is scheduled for Thursday, July 13th, 2023 at 10:30 a.m.
Move we stand adjourned until, oh gosh, what date did you say? July 13th, 2023.
Second.
July 13th. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thanks, everyone.